Hello, my name is Marianne Dyer. I'm Program Director for Redeploy Illinois at the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. I'm here today to provide technical assistance and information about the Notice of Funding Opportunity for Adult Redeploy Illinois State Fiscal Year 23 Expansion Grants. As we go through this recording and as you look at the instructions for the NOFO that are up on the website, you'll see a number of acronyms, including ARI standing for Adult Redeploy Illinois, CRA standing for Crime Reduction Act, which is our enabling legislation, GATA for Grants Accountability and Transparency Act, which guides and governs all grant making in the state, CJA, the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, and NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity. The agenda for today is we'll talk a little bit about ARI and then go into the Notice of Funding Opportunity, its requirements, the review process, and offer some resources. So Adult Redeploy Illinois is a state grant program. We were created by the Crime Reduction Act of 2009 to increase local alternatives to incarceration. This was in the midst of a lot of emerging research that locally based, community-based services do a better job at reducing recidivism and future crime than sending people to the Department of Corrections. So this program is housed at the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, the state agency dedicated to improving the administration of justice in the state through grant making and research. We're modeled after the successful Juvenile Redeploy Illinois program at the Department of Human Services, and we draw on national best practices of performance incentive funding and justice reinvestment. The goals of Adult Redeploy Illinois are to reduce crime and recidivism in a way that's cost efficient for taxpayers. So with public safety as our primary goal, we provide financial incentives to counties and judicial circuits to create effective local programming that will allow them to safely supervise and serve people in the community as opposed to sending them to expensive state prisons. In exchange for the funding, the jurisdictions agree to reduce the prison commitments that they make from a target population that they define by 25%. And this is intended to encourage the successful local supervision of eligible individuals and support their reintegration into the locality while holding them accountable. Another big part of Adult Redeploy Illinois is that we ask our sites to perform rigorous data collection and analysis to assess the outcomes of the program, because we are always intending to show that this way of investing state dollars locally works, maintains public safety, and leads to better individual and community outcomes. The current ARI network is comprised of 27 grantees or sites that cover 44 counties around the state that operate over 50 prison diversion programs. And the purpose of this Notice of Funding Opportunity is to expand that network by offering planning and implementation grants with the overall goal to reduce the number of people that are being committed to prison on probation eligible charges. Eligibility for this funding is limited to county units of government or judicial circuits, and a county may submit on their own behalf or on behalf of a group of counties or a judicial circuit. Other local units of government, private agencies, or not-for-profit organizations are not eligible to apply for these funds. However, we strongly encourage you to work with the county units of government because you can provide personnel or services through subawards or subcontracts. And because ARI is highly dependent not only on supervision practices, but community-based services, we like to see strong collaboration between county units of government and their service providers. The funds available in this Notice of Funding Opportunity are $1.5 million. The grants will range from the smaller planning grants of $5,000 to up to $1 million for implementation. We estimate that we will award 2 to 5 grants through the solicitation, but that is open. And the award period runs from October 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. There are 2 tracks, specific tracks, in this notice of funding opportunity. So one is for those jurisdictions that are interested in a planning grant. And a planning grant is intended to have a jurisdiction to take the time and the space to develop a plan to create or expand a prison diversion program. And some examples of the activities that would be funded through a planning grant are data analysis, resource mapping, as well as stakeholder meetings and site visits to other model programs to learn from, so that the local stakeholders can identify what it is that they want to do in their program that's different from business as usual, that will help with this goal of preserving public safety and reducing reliance on the Department of Corrections. And the final deliverable of any planning grant will be what we call a local plan. And the local plan is an implementation plan that would be available to the jurisdiction to submit in a subsequent funding opportunity for implementation funds. However, a planning grantee is not required or obligated to implement the plan that they come up with and submit as their final deliverable. We find there's value in the planning process alone. The second track is for the implementation grants, and this would be for jurisdictions that already are operating program that they want to expand or already have gone through a planning or strategic process and know what it is that they want to create. The application itself is the local plan. So whether it was produced in a prior planning process or whether it's created as the program narrative is constructed, the logic model is constructed, and letters of support are brought together, that is what the application will look like. And some of the examples of what would be funded for implementation based on our current network is for the operation of problem-solving courts like drug courts, mental health courts, or veterans courts. The creation or expansion of intensive supervision probation caseloads that offers services for clients based on risks, needs, and responsivity principles. And then any other enhancements or efforts to fill gaps in supervision or services that would make the difference between sending somebody to prison or being able to keep them locally and offer community-based services. So the funds from the solicitation will support development and implementation of local plans for prison diversion, and successful applicants will explain how addressing the risks, needs, and strengths of a defined target population through effective target interventions will lead to greater public safety and reduced reliance on prison. So we've been talking a lot about local plans. This is the mechanism that's enshrined in the Crime Reduction Act for getting adult redeploy Illinois funds from the state to the local jurisdiction. And a local plan is essentially a mini strategic plan. It starts everywhere from the summary of the program and a description of the service area being funded to a robust statement of the problem using data, numbers and narratives, then a listing of the key partners that are actually going to come together and make this a successful implementation, all the details of the project implementation, including the description of the target population and target intervention or interventions, how this might impact the current system, a logic model, which we'll talk a little bit later, and then an implementation schedule. Because, as I said, we're focused on data analysis And outcomes measures, we require all of the sites to develop a series of goals, objectives, and performance metrics. And then because we want to provide savings to taxpayers and show that funds used locally produce better results, we have a statement of cost effectiveness. And then in the event a problem-solving court is being proposed, that must also go through certification process with the Administrative Office of the Illinois Courts. And then, of course, the budget detail and budget narrative round out the local plan. So as I said, the local plan is essentially a target population description and target intervention description. Target population, per our legislation, anybody who can be served by Adult Redeploy Illinois funds is somebody who's probation eligible and prison bound. So this could be any offense that does not require a prison sentence, but is able to be served in the community should those services and supervision levels that are necessary are available. And ARI funds are intended to make sure that those are available. So furthermore, and we'll talk a little bit about the total eligible population and how that's defined, but a jurisdiction can, in their local plan, say that they're going to attempt to serve the entire eligible population through a variety of services, or they can define a subset of the target population that is more closely matched to the target interventions that they want to use. Like, for example, a drug court would serve people with diagnosed substance use disorders. So that would be a subset of the target population. We recognize in allowing individual sites to define their target population that jurisdictions best understand their local needs and they're best situated to identify who they can work with and how they work with while maintaining public safety. But we do encourage that jurisdictions look to serve the most people that can benefit from an alternative to incarceration while preserving public safety. So as I mentioned, the total eligible population, how is that defined? The Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority actually looks at data from the past 3 years that's supplied by the Department of Corrections about who is coming in their front doors who would otherwise have been eligible for probation. We look at these numbers. They're analyzed by county, by offense class, and offense type. And the intention is to offer these data to local jurisdictions to look at and determine who could be better served in the community if services were available, and how can we provide those services. So let's look a little bit at these eligibility tables. This is what you're going to find posted on the ARI grant website at the Grants tab, and this is part of the process of applying for funds. You'll see something like this. It's an Excel spreadsheet. This is just a screenshot that shows the selected court admissions tab, and encircled here is the calculation already of the total eligible population, that 3-year average of all those people who came from the county into the Department of Corrections on a probation eligible charge. And so here we can see Boone County sent 80 people on average over the past 3 years on probation eligible charges to the Department of Corrections. Further on, there are individual tabs for the years looking at by county the types of offenses by class, offense class, and offense type that went. So of those 80 people that Boone sent to the Department of Corrections in 2020, for example, 10 of them went in on the lowest level, class 4 person charge. 14 went in on the lowest level probation charge, and 20 people went in on the lowest level controlled substances charge. So this will give you an indication of who's going in on what types of charges as a means to zero in on an effective target population. There's also a tab called Suggested ARI Program Eligible, which provides demographics of those individuals. And the circle here shows that CEDRA has broken out, for example, an emerging adults population, which are these young adults ages 17 to 24, who might be a very important population to focus on and to offer additional targeted interventions. We also have by race and by sex. For example, if a site wanted to look at a gender responsive caseload in probation, there would be some valuable information here. So let's look at what a target population calculation might look like. So if you're a 3-year baseline average, the total probation eligible is 80, then that reduction goal that you would put in the grant agreement, or that would be put into the grant agreement as kind of the accountability mechanism. So in exchange for these funds, we do expect you to achieve these results. That would be a reduction goal of 20. If the subset looked more like the low-level offenses, only the class 3s and 4s, and that's what the stakeholders wanted to focus on, and that number was of 80 was actually 60, then the 25% reduction goal would be 15. Further, as we mentioned, a drug court, if you were looking at the low-level offenses and the people who are likely to have substance use disorders, which may be estimated at 2/3 of those going through the system, then that target population number would be 40 and your reduction goal would be 10. We'll talk a little bit about this, but as these numbers, the cost per person served, must be a cost-effective alternative to incarceration. As I said, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but reducing the number also does reduce cost effectiveness. So as far as the target interventions then that you would apply to a target population, it can be essentially any type of program model, intervention, or combination thereof that's aligned with our goals of working with prison-bound individuals in the community and meeting their risks, needs, and leveraging their strengths. And it also must be based or informed by evidence that shows that it actually is effective with this target population in reducing future crime. And a number of our sites do use problem-solving court models. And as I mentioned, they must be certified, or then the process of being certified. Jurisdictions focus on probation caseloads and enhance the services that are available to clients on probation. And there are a variety of other ways of using the funds. Innovation and experimentation is strongly encouraged. ARI likes to invest in new ideas and likes to see how those things work in different laboratories, if you will, around the state. And then if we find something that works, we like to see that replicated and shared with the rest of the network. Regardless of the program model chosen, it must follow the 8 principles of effective interventions, which are listed here. It must involve an assessment of risk, needs, and strengths. It must focus on working with the individual and encouraging their motivation to change. The intervention should be targeted according to risk, needs, and responsivity, or different factors that would relate to how well they may interact with a different programming. So like a gender responsive cognitive behavioral therapy model may be needed here. That's part of responsivity. Skill train with directed practice, so that's cognitive behavioral therapy, as I mentioned. There should be a focus on the positive as well as avoiding negative things happening. We should reinforce positive things as they occur with incentives and praise and support. Engage ongoing support in the community so that this is something that will support their reintegration eventually. Measurement of the relevant processes and practices. We've talked about performance measurement, data collection, and then engage in this measurement feedback loop so that we can always be learning from what we've been doing, what works, what doesn't work, and continuous quality improvement. So some of the allowable expenses that might be used for the operation of any of these program models, they just must be reasonable, necessary, and allocable to the program. And some examples are personnel, training and travel, program supplies and equipment, and then client services and behavioral health, mental health, substance use disorder, and then any type of wraparound services like client transportation assistance or housing, incentives, I mentioned, positive reinforcement, and then anything that will help with the infrastructure of the program, whether it's staffing or technology, to be able to collect this data and offer it to us in program evaluation. I've mentioned the reduction goal, which comes from the target population calculation. In exchange for the fund, sites must agree to reduce by 25% the number of people sent from their target population. There is an accountability mechanism in the form of a reimbursement provision. So this is part of our legislation. It's never been used with any of our grantees. We've always been able to work with corrective action from this, but if the goal, reduction goal, isn't met, there is this mechanism in the legislation for a site to reimburse a portion of the grant. But as I said, we have never instituted this, but we need to put this in front of any potential grantees. So we talked a little bit about performance measurement and evaluation, and that primarily that data, those data are collected through quarterly progress reports, as well as electronic data transfers from case management systems. And all of this is intended to make that data collection as seamless and as accurate as possible. Grantee sites must also agree to partner with us and any other outside entity or CJA to research what's being done and to offer information to the greater good. So we talked a little bit about cost effectiveness, and this is a key part of ARI, that what is done in the community is not only more effective, as research shows, but it's also more cost effective than incarceration. And we know from state fiscal year 21, the latest data we have available, that a year in prison costs approximately $43,000. So when we are looking for substantial savings in the community, we're looking for a cost per person served that's substantially less than $43,000. And I can say that the average ARI interventions over the last several years have been between $4,000 and $5,000. So just a tenth of the cost of prison. Okay, so the notice of funding opportunity. Let's get into the components of this. Here's the timeline. The notice of funding opportunity was posted July 29th. A notice of intent, which is not required but strongly encouraged, is due August 15th. Any questions about the notice of funding opportunity or anything that we've talked about in this recording need to be submitted via email, which we have the email address all over the NOFO instructions and later on in this recording. Must be submitted by August 18th. We answer those questions and post all the answers so that every potential grantee can benefit from the information that's shared. Applications are due 1 month from the posting, so by 11:59 p.m. August 29th, and those will come in via email. They'll be reviewed by our Oversight Board and Site Selection and Monitoring Committee in September, and then the program period is October 2022 to June 30th, 2023. There's a pre-qualification process that's very well explained in the NOFO instructions, so I encourage you to look through that very carefully. And let's talk a little bit about what needs to be submitted to put in a complete application. First, there's a uniform application form for state grant assistance, and you will need to submit 2 versions of that, one in PDF that's signed and scanned, and then one in a Word file. So 2 versions of the application form, and then a program narrative. And we'll talk a little bit about this, but there is a separate program narrative for planning and a track 1 and a separate program narrative for track 2 implementation. So use the correct one according to what type of funds you're requesting. There's a budget and budget narrative, which comes in an Excel format that's provided, and only for implementation requests, we are asking also for a logic model submitted in Word and letters of support that are signed and submitted as PDFs. This is what the uniform application looks like. There's a link to it in the Notice of Funding instructions. Again, submit this twice, once in Word without the signatures and once in PDF with the signatures. And there is a process reason for why we need it in 2 formats, so please do that for a complete application. So the program narrative, as I said, it'll be either track 1 or track 2. We require that there are formatting requirements. It's not to exceed 20 pages. That doesn't include attachments of logic models or letters of support, 12-point font, and we strongly encourage sites or grantees or applicants to use person-centered language, refrain from talking about offenders or felons and other stigmatizing language, and instead use, as we attempt to do, person-centered language like people, individuals, and clients. The budget narrative, as I mentioned, is an Excel-based template and forms provided by CEJA. It's a lot of detail in there, but it walks you all the way through it. For track 2, as I mentioned, implementation, we do require a logic model, and there's a template that is provided. But the idea is to make sure that somebody is really thinking through this the way that we want them to think through a new program or an expanded program development, and that's to look at what are the inputs that you need to make this successful. What are the outputs that are expected? What sort of activities? What sort of participation do we see around the table? And then finally, what sort of outcomes in the short, medium, or long term do we expect to see if we put in these inputs, do these activities? What do we expect to see at the end? It's a very useful process to go through. And then letters of support, because we know that these are important programs to the community. We want to see a wide range of community leaders signed on in support of it, including a chief judge or presiding criminal court judge, state's attorney, public defender, and then the director of probation or court services. So again, the application due date is August 29th, 2022 by 11:59 p.m. They must be submitted electronically to cja.adultredeploy.nofo@illinois.gov. We cannot accept mail, fax, or in-person applications. They all need to come to this email address, and late submissions will not be reviewed. So once the applications come in, we have staff from ARI and CJIS screening the applications for completeness. Then they go to an expert panel for review and scoring. We'll talk a little bit about this. And then finally, the final decisions will be made by our oversight board and committees. So the program requirements, let's talk a little bit about that in track 1 for planning, with the goal to assemble stakeholders to review data and collaboratively develop a local plan to establish or expand a prison diversion program. The requirements are that a multidisciplinary team is in place, planning activities take place like hiring a facilitator, data analysis, stakeholder training, site visits, or resource mapping, and then the final report needs to be part of that, which again is the local plan. For track 2, implementation, with the goal to implement a completed local plan and to establish or expand a prison diversion program, we would expect to see plans to assess clients' risk, needs, and strengths, a list of evidence-based practices that will be put into use for target interventions, performance measurement plan, agreement to a reduction goal, and the reimbursement provision, problem-solving court certification if applicable, and then agree to working with us on evaluation processes. So the track 1 planning scoring sheet is on this slide, and while somewhat difficult to read, if you can just see how the 100 points, which is the total number of points, how they're allocated across the summary of the program, statement of the problem, project implementation, project management, goals and performance metrics, and then the budget. Track 2 at the next 2 slides, similar criteria in terms of summary. It also has a description of service area, a little bit more robust treatment of the statement of the problem and the key partners. It also totals 100, and the bulk of it is in the description of the proposed ARI program or the project implementation. There is also goals and metrics section, cost effectiveness calculation, evidence of certification of any problem solving courts, and budget detail. So some of the resources that we have available are at the ARI website, which is right here. We have a grants tab, which has the application information and eligibility tables. We have what's called an apps tab, which has some additional data sets and substance use and mental health disorder continuum information that might offer some ideas for target interventions, as well as identifying target populations. And then there's a resources tab, which is past ARI training materials and technical assistance materials. The CJIS website has also got just a ton of information that can be useful if there's anything that you might be looking for. They have what's called a research hub, which has articles and full studies and interactive things that can work, interactive data sets that you can access all at your fingertips. And then there's a whole page and some webinars that are dedicated to how to complete a proposal and get all your pieces in place to submit according to best practices in the state as defined by GATA. So if there are any questions regarding this notice of funding opportunity, we require that those be submitted electronically, and that gives us the opportunity to respond to them. And then again, as I said, make available the question and answer and all the information that's shared to all the applicants by posting it on our website. So we need to process everything electronically. And those questions and answers will be posted you'll receive the answer, but then the posting of the questions and answers will also be at the CJA Illinois website at the GATA page. For more information, you can contact the ARI Program Manager, Stacy Woods, via the cja.adultredeploynofo@illinois.gov email address. So as a reminder, if you want to apply for our expansion grant, which we hope you do, please submit all your required materials electronically by 11:59 August 29th. That's the application form, 2 versions, PDF and Word. Program narrative, whether it's track 1 for planning, if you're asking for a planning grant, or track 2 program narrative if you're asking for an implementation grant. The questions are different and give us the information we need. The budget and budget narrative, and then if you are submitting for implementation, also include a logic model and letters of support. Thank you for your interest in Adult Redeploy Illinois, and we look forward to hearing from you.